everyone, so today I'm going to review this keyboard. It's called the Starboard and it's one of the options you have for getting for a stenography keyboard. So when I first started looking into stenography, I wasn't interested as a career yet. I just wanted to try it as a hobby. However, the reality is that you need to be able to press down multiple keys, like a lot of keys at the same time, and have your keyboard register that and output it to your computer. If you mash a bunch of keys at the same time on most keyboards, they're only going to register the first 6 or so. And it's only if you have what's known as NKRO, N-key rollover, keyboards that will be able to register every press you press at the same time. And as one of the leading members of the Plover community, Eric, has demonstrated in his video about how to choose a stenography keyboard, a majority of chords in stenography are going to require you to press more than 6 keys at once. And I recommend his video as a resource for how to use your regular keyboard for stenography as far as it can go, including even maybe 3D printing keycaps and so on. Personally, I started flipping through the Lapwing book and learned the first few chapters, but as soon as I got to the end of chapter 5, I realized that my keyboard was not going to cut it. I wasn't willing to go with the arpeggiating methods of typing, so I wanted a board that I would be able to press down all the keys at the same time. The additional disadvantage of regular keyboards is usually the switches are way too heavy to be pressing down at the same time. If you press down 3 keys at the same time that are each 60 grams, 180 grams, okay. But if you're suddenly pressing down 7 or 8 at the same time, that gets a lot heavier and it is a lot more strenuous. So after reaching the end of chapter 5 and deciding that I did want to go in on the stenography keyboard, I went to this page on the Plover wiki to consider my options. I'd say that the main options available for hobbyists at the time of this video are the Asterisk from Steno keyboards, the Uni and the Polyglot from Steno keyboards, the Ecosteno and Multisteno from Nortronics, the Starboard from Stenography Store, and the Javelin from Shonada Creations. And obviously I ended up choosing the Starboard. And I've actually enjoyed my pick a lot. I think it's probably one of the ones with the most advantages. So I'm going to explain each feature that I like about this and how it compares to the others on the list. The first thing that was most important to me was the price. Although it's not as much as my keyboard build, these are expensive. And with the exception of the Asterisk, which is touch-based and doesn't have switches or keycaps, the average price is around $100. Personally, I rolled out the Asterisk because I did want something with actual switches. So after that, with shipping, Starboard is the next cheapest at $100. Depending on what options you pick, the Uni and the Ecosteno are about $110 with shipping, and I believe Polyglot's around $135, and Multisteno is in the $170, $180 range. The premier board right now for hobbyists is the Javelin, which is basically full-featured and has everything you could possibly ever need or want. However, at the price tag of about $330 or more, it's not an easy investment to make if you're just starting out on stenography, so I don't recommend that if you're new. The next thing to consider is the key layout. As you can see, the Starboard is completely symmetrical. It has 2 thumb keys each, and it has 2 extra keys on the left pinky. Out of the box, I believe this key is an asterisk, this key is the number bar, and then I believe top S is also number. In comparison to the other boards, some of them have a 3rd thumb key on each side, some of them don't have 2 keys on the left side, some of them have an extra row on top for the number bar. And in the case of the Polyglot and the Multisteno, they're designed so that you can also do QWERTY typing on them. One thing I forgot to mention is that if you're worried about switching between QWERTY and Steno, you don't have to because your keyboard and your Steno keyboard operate on 2 different protocols. So it's possible to have them both plugged in at the same time and they both work. So if you don't mind the 2 keyboards, you don't need to learn orthographic QWERTY with a reduced number of keys, which I have no interest in. So just so you know, yes, your keyboards can both work plugged in at the same time. One other thing I considered briefly before buying my keyboard was whether I could do Korean Steno. And since one of the main layouts includes 3 rows, that would have pushed me to go towards either the Polyglot or the Multisteno. But I realized I had one more key in the middle. And although I didn't know what purpose it had at the time, now that I know it's a spacebar, that does mean that I could have used one of those 3-rowed Steno keyboards for Korean Steno. But it turns out I ended up with a dedicated Korean Steno keyboard anyway. So personally, I really like this layout. I love how it has 2 extra keys and that's just about it. The one disadvantage I say about this layout is not having the number bar on top because that is something that is on a lever machine. But it's not too hard to adapt to like having top S be number. So I'd say, especially if you're sticking to hobby, no reason to not go with this layout. The next thing is the form factor, and this is obviously a little ergonomic. It's got staggered keys for your fingers and it's at an angle. And that's like theoretically more ergonomic and easier on your wrists. I wouldn't say that's a requirement, but I thought it was fun. So another point for Starboard. Most of the other options are laid out in a line orthographically, and that's no problem as well. One thing I'd say is that since this keyboard is kind of bare bones, it's like on its PCB and then it's hanging out, there's no case. I haven't actually seen this in person, but like compared to the pictures of like uni, for example, it does look like it's a little more polished as like a keyboard, but you get used to all the pins on the bottom quickly and it does help grip a little bit. I also love that they have the option for the screw for the tripod if you want to use it. Not every option on the list has this, so it's great to just have that, although I haven't actually used it yet personally. The next thing I think is a huge point in the favor of the Starboard, and that's the switches it has. It runs with chalk switches, which are these, they're different from like most of the ones in keyboards. They're like, they have the little cross. So here's the chalk switches, and that's what it looks like. So this is low profile because the travel distance is much shorter than the regular ones that are a lot taller. And they're hot swappable and everything, but you wouldn't want to hot swap these because they are pretty much the ideal switch, in my opinion, for stenography. They're only 20 grams. You could only really improve on that by being maybe like 10 or something like that. But it's pretty much as light as you can go. And when I first got this, it was like super light. I had to really get used to it and how easy it was to press down these keys. But it really helps when you're pressing down multiple keys and makes it feel not strenuous at all. And I just really love that it ships pre-built with those switches. That's in comparison to, for example, Uni and Polyglot, I believe, use the, I think, is it called GMK switches? I don't really know what it's called, but the regular ones. So they ship with heavier switches and it's not quite as, you know, ideal as the 20. And some people do end up modding and like switching the springs in their switches. So I really like that this came like this, so I didn't have to do any sort of upgrades like that. The other thing about chalk switches is that they're like thinner. So when you compare this to like a regular lever machine, for example, the distance is the same. With the other type of switches, your fingers will be a little bit wider out. So it's a little bit of a different feeling than it would be on the lever machine. It's less of a one-to-one. From a sound perspective, it does not sound pretty. I don't know, it just sounds really unlubed and unpretty to me. But you can't really do much about it because it doesn't have a case. So I got used to it pretty quickly. It does feel a little fragile just being on the PCB, but electronics are more sturdy than you think they are. And it does fit in like a Nintendo Switch case if you do want to travel. I've already done that trick already. In terms of what it comes with as well, it just has the essentials and nothing else that you don't need, which I really like. It gave me this C to A USB cord, and then also an adapter of A back to C, so in case I wanted to plug this into my phone or something. So the Starboard itself has a C port here, and you can plug it into your computer with A, or I plug it into my phone with C to C. And on that note of plugging into my phone, one of the other reasons I picked this board is that it has Javelin support. So it has the microcontroller that allows you to flash it with firmware for Javelin, which is one of the latest and greatest innovations in the hobbyist community right now. Basically, Plover is a software that intakes the input from your board with a protocol. Most of them use Gemini, but it takes other protocols. But out of the box, this has Gemini. It works perfectly with Plover. Plover then takes the strokes and translates them to English. Javelin changes the game by loading your dictionary onto the keyboard itself. It stores all your translation data in memory on the board. That means instead of sending strokes to your computer, you are now sending translations to your computer. And even better, this means you can plug this straight up to a phone and use it as an input for typing on your phone. It changes your Steno board from something that needed software to interpret the output of the board to basically being a plug-and-play keyboard. So as of this video, I do believe that pretty much every board I've talked about in this video does support Javelin, but that wasn't the case before. Not every single board had that capability. But yeah, if you're buying a hobbyist keyboard in 2025, I really recommend you make sure you have Javelin compatibility. Alright, so that's pretty much it, and I hope you see why I'm satisfied with my Starboard and why I like it compared to the other options out there. If you want to build your own keyboard, they also offer Starboard PCB just alone, and you'd have to get your own switches and keycaps. And one of the other popular build your owns is Ecosteno from Lordtronics. I bet that considering the form factor of the current Starboard, there'll be upgrades in the future and maybe it'll get even better. But I really like how it had the lowest price. It's shipped with those 20-gram switches, and it's overall just a great option and layout. Okay, once again, the video is too long today. And how's my week? Felt like every week so far, to be honest. I got through the lesson, I got through the practice. It wasn't that hard. We were still finishing single syllable sounds. I believe there was long U and long I, as well as Z, initial KN on KPW. There was ending MP on FPL, which actually I kind of like. There's initial Q and also ending TH, which they're using GT. So although the shapes are a little new for me this week, none of the concepts are new. So pretty smooth overall. Legal terms is almost coming to an end. I've got one more chapter, which I'm doing today, and then the final exam next week. Other than that, I'm really looking forward to next week. They're doing review, and then the next week after that is spring break. So there isn't going to be a lot of new steno taught for a couple weeks, but I'm looking forward to the reset and being able to put my time in some other stuff. I'm going to look ahead in theory a little bit and see what's coming up, and maybe get a chance to program a trainer for Korean steno and get to some other projects overall. I do want to study Korean a little bit harder because I'm getting anxious about the TOEIC test that I'm taking coming up in just over a month now, so it's getting close. Alright, thanks for watching today.